Education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today.
Professor Presbury back with another episode of Hey Professor, the show we talk about everything you wanted to know about health information management, allied health, healthcare administration, business management, and business information and informatics. I am your professor, Javon M.H. Presbury. It's actually funny, you'd be surprised I still don't get that right all the time. I mess it up all the time. We're going to do an episode of Students Ask. Basically, one of the students asked me a question. I'm going to answer that question. The question was, Professor, what are some of the pros and cons of working in a large organization versus working in a small organization? And is it possible for someone to move up the ladder into leadership in that healthcare organization? Go over both the pros and cons fairly quickly, I think. So I'll start with the pros of each thing and then the cons of each thing. Working in a large organization, you can kind of get the sense that your financial security by working there, as far as like how long your job's gonna last, how long the organization's gonna last, is fine. It's completely better. What I mean is, working in a small organization, let's say I've dealt with DNFBs, big and small, some of the large organizations. Let's say I have a DNFB anywhere between, let's say that's 12 million, 20 million, right? That stays there for a day or two. Not that big of a deal. You work at some smaller places, what's gonna happen is you're gonna have a little bit of a sense of different urgency. $2 million may be a big deal to you guys, right? Whereas in a bigger organization, one account may be $2 million. And believe me when I say that, that goes into everything. That goes into how you work, that goes into how it feels to work, that goes into how your boss speaks to you, how you deal with those types of cases, how you deal with your coding team. Because if you have an organization that needs their money now because they're smaller and they're not as nimble, then you're really going to need that money now, and that really plays into the urgency and just the feel of working there. So the pros and cons: working in a small organization may have less accounts because you do less inpatients, you have less beds. But the pros and cons being that the con would be that you kind of feel like there's more tension, there's more urgency, there's more pressure to get those accounts moved because you guys need your money. Whereas you may go a day or a week without those accounts moving in a large organization, and that's perfectly normal. Large organization versus small. You may work in an organization where you have a lot of staff, or there's a lot of people in your department, then versus, let's say, a small organization where you may have a team of between 4 and 6. I've had staff that were as little as 1 or 2 people. I've had staff that were as big as 35 people. Now, where that really differs is that a lot of times in the larger organizations, the more people you have under you, it's really layered. Now, what I mean is, when it's layered, it's completely different type of work, right? Layered meaning that there's different layers between you and the staff. If your leadership in a large organization, you may have a supervisor under you, and then under that person you may have a, let's say, standard secretary for the whole unit or for the department who does a lot of things as well. Whereas in a smaller organization, it may just be you as the director, you as the manager, overseeing your staff of 4, your staff of 6, and there's nobody in between you guys. It's just you and them. If you've seen my other video on types of management, you know that there is what I call the working manager and the theoretical manager. Now, I've done both. I've been a working manager, I've been a theoretical manager. What a working manager is basically just a manager who may assign the work, but is also expected to do the work that they assign. I've done both, and I'm not saying that one is better than the other. It's not a better or worse kind of thing, but what I will say is that I know which one I prefer. I prefer to be the theoretical. I don't want to do the stuff I'm telling you to do. I want you to do it. So the pros and cons of that really go into what you prefer. If you're okay with doing the work, then that's fine. If you want to be more of a theoretical manager, which I will tell you comes with completely different load of work, different type of work, that's fine as well. So pros and cons, I will say, as far as industry-wide, the theoretical manager, the theoretical director has a lot more respect. You're handling a lot more people. Honestly, the higher the number of people that are under you, the more respect that you have. So if you have like 4 people, they're gonna look at you like, you're a manager, but you're only a manager in name only. Sense of expediency. There's a lot of expediency when you work in a small organization. Things just move faster, and maybe because there's just not a lot of layers, there's not a lot of people involved. Decisions are faster and easier to make and to move on because not that many people involved. You can implement something relatively quickly, kind of maybe just pass it by your boss. Sometimes you don't even have to pass it by your boss. You can kind of just say, hey, I'm doing this, and that's how it is. Pros and cons of that concept. For a large organization, it takes longer to do any of those things. Sometimes you may have to have an entire committee. Sometimes you may have literal meetings that could go on for months. Not like obviously one long meeting, but you might have a meeting in January, a meeting in February, meeting in March before something is finally implemented. I mean, it can take that long. It can take longer. So in a lot of these bigger organizations, they're considered what I call bloated, where you might want to make a choice, a decision, and it doesn't move that fast. You may be spinning your wheels, spending a lot of time doing nothing, or theoretically nothing, because you're a theoretical director. Whereas in the smaller one, you're kind of moving a lot faster. You're a lot more nimble. You can make changes. You can undo those changes, maybe at the end of the week, maybe even at the end of the day, if you have your things mapped out and planned out right. Intimacy and knowing your team. Now, when I say intimacy, I don't mean, no, I don't, I don't mean that. When I mean intimacy, I mean the intimacy of your work. You may know your entire facility. It depends on how small your organization is. I've worked at organizations as small as 60 bed. I've worked at organizations as large as like 400 bed. Drastic difference. You know what I mean? So when I say intimacy, like there may be several, like let's put it this way, right? When I worked in New York at the one facility I worked at, there were several directors of nursing because there were several different layers. There was directors of nursing education. There was a director of nursing, whatever, just like 5-6 different people where I couldn't tell where one began and the other one ended. It kind of seemed like they all did the same thing and then none of them did anything, but then they all did something. It was weird. Whereas when I worked at the small facility, walk across the hall, there's a director of nursing. Just that's it. He's the DON. He's the director of nursing and he does everything as it pertains to nursing. And I was kind of like, okay, this is different. You know what I mean? Because this one guy handles everything, but he only may have 20 nurses under him. It's a different feel. You may be able to just walk across the hall and reach out to the CEO. Whereas in other places, you're not going to see the CEO for maybe weeks, months at a time. That person is booked. Pros and cons, again, things move a lot more quickly. You can kind of really gain a sense of camaraderie in that small organization. You kind of get that sense of intimacy. It depends on what you're really looking for. If you really want to really know somebody on a personal level and reach out to them very quickly, maybe that smaller scale one is what you want. The pros and cons, if you want to work somewhere larger, maybe that larger one is what you're really gonna want. As far as other things, compensation, yes, it does matter. Yes, it does depend. But and when I say depend, I mean depends on the health of your organization. But my experience, the larger the organization, the more pay. I've done jobs where I'm the HIM manager. I'm making $65,000. I have seen HIM manager, and that's why I'm saying it's not a one for one. HIM manager elsewhere making $120,000. So it's like you're kind of doing the same thing, but you're not. It's largely dependent on the organization. I've seen HIM directors that get paid something as little as $50,000 a year. Maybe they have, again, a very small staff. It's maybe like a rehab or something like that. I've seen HIM directors where they're making $250,000 a year. Literally, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's different. Like, it's not the same all across the board. Pros and cons, how much you want to make. You know what I mean? You want to make the 250, you want to make the big bucks. There's a lot more that comes with those big bucks. And I'm gonna tell you, you're a lot less likely to jump from one to the other. What do I mean? You work in a rehab, you work in a small bed facility, you're a working manager. Remember, you are a manager, but you may be a manager in name only. That doesn't come with as much respect as the guy that has 35, 40 people under him. That's completely different. This guy's doing budgets. This guy's handling entire things. This guy's doing meetings and contracts with vendors. He's negotiating all kinds of stuff, right? The working manager may just be the manager who's working and telling the small guy what to do. I just realized there's actually a lot going into this, so I'm going to make this a 2-part video. So I hope this answered a lot of the questions for this part. I'm going to have a second part coming out, and I appreciate you guys. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Intelligence is not enough. Intelligence plus character. That is the true goal of education.